Welcome to this short overview on business fundamentals. I'm Dr. Scott of the Madison School of Professional Development, and I'll be leading you through the terms, concepts, and real-world applications covered in this presentation. When we hear the term business, most of us will have a pretty good conception of what it is and what it means. When pressed for a precise definition, however, we quickly realize the term is more difficult to pin down than we anticipated. In fact, multiple definitions are often required, and even then, those definitions still fail to capture all of the possible elements of businesses and business activities. So, to begin, let's look at a few quick definitions of what business is and why it is important to study. First, we need to understand the difference between a single business and a more general form of business activity. A single business can best be described as any activity or venture entered into for profit. General examples include nail salons, restaurants, and even farms. More generally, though, when we think of business in more holistic terms, we find definitions like the organized effort of an individual or individuals through the production or sale of goods or by providing services to make a profit. The key to most of these types of definitions is the emphasis on making profit. While not all businesses may make a profit, it is usually the intention of those involved to make money. This definition, and ones like it though, do not adequately cover nonprofit ventures, nor do they sufficiently describe some modern business metrics of success, such as social media followers or clicks, that are not entirely focused on profit as the guiding purpose of the business. To begin to describe businesses today, we need to also incorporate concepts like serving stakeholders, branding and corporate responsibility, nonprofits and other mission-driven ventures, and human resources management, just to name a few. And that's just scratching the surface. We haven't even mentioned information technology, big data, global supply chains, risk management, or even public administration. Another key concept that is often difficult to pin down is business fundamentals. Like business itself, the fundamentals of business are subject to a variety of schools of thought, a multiverse of theoretical frameworks, a smattering of overlap and consensus, and a fair amount of general disagreement. To help us make sense of some of this, let's begin by thinking through some of the ways that business fundamentals can be described or defined. For example, we could think of business fundamentals as instructions for starting or operating a business, as rules or an ethical framework for business activities, as the skills needed to be successful, as guiding principles, as topics in a business studies course, or as standards under review in an operational or organizational audit or internal assessment, and so on and so forth. We'll be looking at some of these different frameworks for business fundamentals over the next few slides. Know that what we present here is not intended to be comprehensive, but to provide you with frameworks that might resonate with you and that can be immediately applied in your career and your day-to-day business activities. Business fundamentals can be thought of as instructions for starting or operating a business. Typically, this approach emphasizes various elements of business operations. For example, on the fundamentals as instructions side, topics often include those elements of business operations where improvements can always be made to maximize efficiency, profits, and growth. These include things like strategic planning, leadership skills and development, sales and services, marketing, managing people, operations and supply, financial management, and legal and ethical frameworks. By studying these topics and building competence in these areas, business professionals can unlock the necessary skills to start or operate a business across industries. However, the act of operating a business is only one way to conceptualize business fundamentals. Business fundamentals can also be thought of as rules for conducting business, and these approaches typically intertwine with ethical practices. For example, business fundamentals in an ethical framework would include topics like quality, responsibility, respect, and efficiency. Other ethically based frameworks emphasize things like accountability, honesty, transparency, people, and respect for the rule of law. By following these rules meant to guide and instruct, practitioners can add value to their business activities. Many of these rules also form the foundations for many modern corporate social responsibility and image efforts. Another common framework for understanding business fundamentals is to approach the topic as a set of skills that, once mastered and applied effectively, all but ensure success. Or, so the story goes. While not as foolproof as we might hope, there is still much benefit to be gained from thinking of business fundamentals through a skills framework. For example, a business fundamental in any industry is to master any industry-specific skills that might include things like operating needed machinery, possessing any necessary training or education, or things like what many people refer to as the tricks of the trade. These days, leadership skills usually top the list of skills, but other skills are usual topics in skills building programs, such as writing a business plan, attaining necessary funding or capital to launch and sustain a business, and then the operational skills needed, such as finance and accounting, human relations management, marketing, strategic planning, and customer relations. There are many other more specific skills that top many of these types of lists, but this quick overview should provide a sampling of the different ways we can think about business fundamentals as skills. Another key way we can think of business fundamentals is somewhat similar to our slide on rules a moment ago, and this is thinking about business fundamentals as principles or even guiding principles. One example of business fundamentals viewed through a framework of guiding principles is as an adaptation of the 4 P's of marketing, which are product, place, price, and promotion. You may also know them as the more modern 5 P's of marketing, which adds people as a 5th P. However, the 8 P's of business fundamentals entail aligning your business model, and your business operations with 8 principles: purpose, promise, people, product, place, price, promotion, and performance. By having a clear purpose, delivering on promises, taking care of people, etc., business leaders can ensure sustainability and growth. Other models for business fundamentals as guiding principles are often presented as basic but very good advice. For example, we see things like be realistic, know your competition, delegate, seek advice or training, master marketing skills. These and other guiding principles, if followed, can help entrepreneurs and business leaders turn small to medium enterprises, also known as SMEs, into successful businesses. I'd also like to share with you one last guiding principles framework. My favorite comes from the Harvard Business Review from back in 2013. And these are the 3 rules for making a company truly great. These are better before cheaper, differentiate rather than undersell, revenue before cost, increase revenue before reducing cost. There are no other rules. Do anything you must to follow rules 1 and 2. Another way to think about business fundamentals is through business studies. Business studies are, of course, the topics and themes you encounter in a college business program. But business studies is more than this. Business studies is actually the study of business, rather than a blueprint for business activities. In other words, business studies are typically more concerned with things like leadership theories and testing through applied research, modern business best practices. As themes and topics, however, this framework inevitably sounds somewhat similar to the frameworks we've covered thus far, with the only difference being the addition of the words the study of. Some of these include the study of leadership, the study of organizational behavior, the study of change management, the study of managerial accounting and finance, or the study of international business or cultural awareness, just to name a few. Another framework I'd like to cover here is to think of business fundamentals as specific metrics for analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of a business or organization. The best way to think of these are as the areas that either internal or external auditors would analyze. This could be in the form of a financial audit, or perhaps a compliance review in a compliance-driven industry like healthcare. There are other examples as well, such as the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG reports that corporations publish to the public, typically annually. In a financial audit, these standards might include things like profitability, revenue, assets, liabilities, reserves, and financial sustainability. In a compliance review, we may again see financial items, but we're more likely to also see things like governance, ethical practices, stakeholder and customer services, consumer privacy and data protection, and policies and reporting. The ESG reporting standards include much of what we've just highlighted, but adds environmental and social sustainability assessments. Please know that the frameworks we've introduced here in this overview are just a few examples of the many different frameworks we can apply to help us think about and understand business fundamentals. As we've seen, there's as many ways to think about business as there are different types of successful business models. I would like to leave you with one more important framework for understanding business fundamentals, and that is the golden rule of business. Now, nearly every culture in the world has a version of the golden rule, which in Western cultures, such as mine, we might define as treat others the way you want to be treated, or the more formal, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This, of course, is an important rule and one we should follow. However, the golden rule of business takes this one step further and focuses on one key way we should treat others. The golden rule of business is be respectful of everyone's time. Above all else, this golden rule of business is an important concept to remember and apply throughout your career. Well, that brings us to the end of this short overview of business fundamentals. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and have found many useful concepts and applications to take forward with you in your business endeavors and your career. To recap, in this video, we introduced different frameworks for thinking about and understanding business fundamentals. These included as instructions for starting or operating a business, as rules or ethical guidelines, as skill sets to be studied and mastered, as guiding principles, as the study of business, and as the standards and metrics of operational efficiency. Finally, we introduced the golden rule of business, which is to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm Dr. Scott, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through this overview of business fundamentals. Until next time, so long, and may all your business endeavors be successful.